I stared at the email lighting up my phone screen, my coffee growing cold beside me. Meeting with Director Matthews, 9 a.m. Mandatory. The timestamp read 8:47 a.m. 13 minutes notice for a meeting that would change everything. I'm Margaret Wilson, 55 years old, and until that moment, I was the senior contracts manager at Elevate Technologies, one of Boston's fastest-growing software companies. For 11 years, I had managed our most crucial client relationships, particularly the Harrison Miller account, a $50 million annual contract that represented nearly 30% of our company's revenue. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our modern office as I made my way to James Matthews' corner office. James, our Director of Client Relations, had joined the company just 8 months ago. At 38, he was part of the new wave of leadership brought in to modernize our approach to client management. I knocked on his door, straightening my blazer out of habit. "Come in, Margaret." His voice carried that artificial warmth I'd grown to recognize. James sat behind his massive desk. Beside him stood a young woman I'd never seen before. She couldn't have been more than 30, dressed in the latest corporate fashion, tablet in hand. "Please take a seat," James gestured to the chair across from him. "This is Alexandra Porter. She's joining us from Tech Solutions International." I nodded politely, the knot in my stomach tightening. I'd been in this industry long enough to know when something wasn't right. "Margaret," James began, folding his hands on the desk, "you've been with Elevate a long time. You've seen the company grow, adapt, change. And now, we're entering a new phase of that evolution." I kept my expression neutral, even as my heart started to race. I knew what was coming. I'd seen it happen to others my age, but knowing didn't make it any easier. "The industry is changing rapidly," he continued. "We need to stay competitive, agile, innovative. Which is why we're restructuring the contracts division. Alexandra here will be taking over as Senior Contracts Manager, effective immediately." The words hit like physical blows, but I didn't flinch. 11 years of negotiating high-stakes contracts had taught me how to maintain composure under pressure. "I see," I said quietly. "And my position?" James shifted slightly, the first crack in his professional facade. "We're offering you a transition to an advisory role. Reduced hours, of course, but it would allow you to support Alexandra as she takes over the accounts." I almost laughed. They wanted me to train my replacement, to hand over 11 years of relationships, knowledge, and trust that I'd built from the ground up. "The Harrison Miller contract is up for renewal in 3 weeks," I pointed out. "They're particularly sensitive to changes in account management." James waved his hand dismissively. "Alexandra has extensive experience in client relations. She'll handle the transition smoothly. Besides, it's time we brought some fresh energy to that account." Fresh energy. The euphemism hung in the air like stale smoke. "To be frank, Margaret," James leaned forward, his voice dropping, "the industry is evolving faster than some can keep up with. We need someone more adaptable, less set in their ways. I'm sure you understand." Adaptable. The word stung more than it should have. I'd adapted to every technology change, every market shift, every new demand over the past decade. I'd learned 3 different contract management systems, mastered digital collaboration tools, and built our entire client portal from scratch. "Of course," I replied, my voice steady. "When would you like me to start the handover?" James smiled, clearly relieved I wasn't making a scene. "Alexandra will shadow you this week. We'd like a full transfer of all account information, contact lists, and pending negotiations by Friday." 5 days. They were giving me 5 days to transfer 11 years of knowledge. "The severance package is generous," he added, sliding a folder across the desk. 6 months' salary, continued health benefits through the end of the year. All we need is your signature on the transition agreement." I picked up the folder without opening it. "I'll review it and get back to you." "Today, if possible," James pressed. "We'd like to announce the change to the team this afternoon." Of course they would. They probably already had the announcement drafted. As I stood to leave, Alexandra stepped forward, her smile bright and rehearsed. "I'm really looking forward to working with you this week, Margaret. I'm sure I can learn so much from your traditional approach." Traditional, another carefully chosen word that meant outdated, obsolete, dispensable. I smiled back, but it didn't reach my eyes. "I'm sure you will." Walking back to my desk, I felt the eyes of my colleagues following me. Word traveled fast in open office spaces. They knew something was happening, even if they didn't know what. I sat down at my computer, the familiar hum of the office continuing around me. Emails kept arriving, calendar notifications popped up, but all I could think about was the Harrison Miller contract sitting in my secured drawer. The contract that James and Alexandra knew nothing about. The contract I had spent months restructuring with Harrison Miller's legal team. The contract that contained very specific clauses about account management and service guarantees. Clauses that would become very interesting in about 3 weeks. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out my personal notebook, the one where I kept detailed notes of every meeting, every conversation, every promise made to our key clients. Information that wasn't in any official system or shared drive. As I flipped through the pages, a plan began to form. James thought I was dispensable, replaceable. He thought client relationships could be transferred as easily as email passwords. He was about to learn how wrong he was. I pulled up my email and began composing a message to Marcus Harrison, CEO of Harrison Miller Technologies. We had built a strong relationship over the years, based on trust, reliability, and mutual respect. He had my personal cell number and had used it more than once during critical negotiations. Subject: upcoming contract renewal. Important discussion. Dear Marcus, I hope this email finds you well. Given our upcoming contract renewal discussions, I believe we should schedule a private meeting to discuss some important developments at Elevate that may impact our partnership. Best regards, Margaret. I hit send and waited. Marcus was known for his quick responses to critical communications. Sure enough, within 5 minutes, my phone buzzed. Call me, his text read. Now. I glanced at James' office. He was showing Alexandra around, probably giving her the grand tour of the department she was about to modernize. I grabbed my phone and headed to the building's rooftop garden, my usual spot for confidential calls. Margaret, Marcus answered on the first ring. What's going on? Your email sounded ominous. I took a deep breath. Marcus, I've just been informed that I'm being transitioned out of my role. They're bringing in someone new to handle the accounts, including Harrison Miller. Silence filled the line. Then, they're what? A younger manager from Tech Solutions International. They want me to train her this week and hand everything over by Friday. 3 weeks before our renewal. Are they insane? Marcus's voice had that edge I recognized from tough negotiations. The board is meeting next week to review the renewal terms. We specifically included those service continuity clauses because we trust you, Margaret. You built this partnership. I know, I said quietly. I also know that Clause 15.3 requires a minimum 90-day transition period for any change in senior account management, with board approval from both companies. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. They didn't read the fine print, did they? Apparently not. What do you need from me, Margaret? I smiled, looking out over the Boston skyline. Nothing yet. Just keep next Monday's board meeting on your calendar. I have a feeling it's going to be interesting. After ending the call, I returned to my desk. Alexandra was there, sitting in my guest chair, tablet ready. Margaret, I thought we could start the handover now. Maybe you could walk me through your filing system. I sat down, knowing how she'd already made herself comfortable in my space. Of course. Happy to help. Though I should mention, have you had a chance to review the Harrison Miller contract yet? The current version, I mean. She blinked. Oh, I'm sure I'll get to all that this week. James said the renewal is pretty straightforward. Did he? I started pulling up files on my computer. Well then, let's start with the basics. Though I should warn you, my filing system is rather traditional. Alexandra nodded enthusiastically, missing the glint in my eye. James had no idea what was coming. But by this time next week, he would learn that experience isn't just about age. It's about knowing exactly which strings to pull when everything falls apart. And I had spent 11 years weaving those strings into a very sturdy safety net. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, well before the usual crowd. The quiet of the empty workspace felt different now, no longer peaceful, but charged with anticipation. I had spent most of the night reviewing the Harrison Miller contract, not because I needed to, I knew every clause by heart, but to ensure my plan was airtight. Alexandra arrived at 9:15, 15 minutes late for our scheduled handover meeting. She breezed in with a coffee cup from the expensive cafe downstairs, apparently unconcerned about her tardiness. Sorry, she chirped, settling into the chair beside my desk. The line was crazy. But I got you a coffee too. She placed a cup on my desk, clearly proud of her thoughtfulness. I glanced at the cup. I don't drink vanilla lattes. I'm allergic to vanilla. Oh, her face fell slightly. James mentioned you were particular about things. I bet he did. Shall we continue with the handover? I pulled up our contract management system. Today we should cover the special terms and conditions for our top 5 clients. Actually, Alexandra interrupted. James wants me to sit in on the tech strategy meeting this morning. He thinks it's important for me to understand the bigger picture. Can we do this after lunch? I smiled slightly. Of course. Though you should know, Harrison Miller's CEO usually calls around 11 a.m. on Tuesdays to discuss their weekly technical requirements. Alexandra's eyes widened. Today? Nobody told me about that. It's not in any calendar. Robert, their COO, prefers to keep these calls informal. He's rather old school that way. I paused. But I'm sure you can handle it. Just remember he's very particular about understanding the technical aspects of our service implementation. Technical aspects. Alexander's confidence wavered for the first time. I thought this was about contract management. Oh, it is. But with Harrison Miller, everything is connected. That's why they insisted on having a manager who could bridge the gap between technical specifications and contract terms. I started gathering my things. Well, you should get to your strategy meeting. I'll be in the archive room if Robert calls. I left her at my desk, looking considerably less sure of herself than when she arrived. By 11 a.m., I was in the archive room, purposely away from my phone, when I heard the commotion. Margaret. It was Susan from reception, slightly out of breath. Robert from Harrison Miller is on the line. He's asking for you specifically. Alexandra tried to take the call, but he's demanding to speak with you. He's pretty upset. I checked my watch. I'll take it in the conference room. When I picked up the phone, Robert's voice boomed through the speaker. Margaret, what the hell is going on over there? I just spent 10 minutes talking to someone who doesn't know the difference between API integration and a mobile app. I apologize, Robert. I'm being transitioned out. Alexandra is taking over the account. Silence. Then the hell she is. We didn't agree to this. Does this have something to do with your email to Marcus? Perhaps we should discuss this offline, I suggested calmly. I believe you're having dinner with Marcus tonight. Robert caught on quickly. Yes, I am. Well, I'll make my feelings about this transition known through the proper channels. Just be available if we need you. Always. By the time I returned to my desk, Alexandra was gone. A message from James blinked on my screen. My office. Now. I took my time walking to his office, stopping to get a cup of tea from the break room. When I finally entered, James was pacing behind his desk. Want to explain what happened with Robert? He demanded. I settled into the chair across from him. What seems to be the problem? The problem? James ran a hand through his hair. The problem is that Robert Stevens just spent 10 minutes yelling about incompetence and threatening to escalate to their board. That does sound serious. This is exactly why we need a smooth transition. You need to handle these calls until Alexandra is up to speed. I tilted my head. But I'm just an advisor now, remember, with reduced hours. Besides, Alexandra assured me she was ready to take over. She has extensive experience in client relations. Isn't that right? James's face reddened. This isn't a game, Margaret. Harrison Miller is our biggest client. Yes, I agreed. They are. Then help Alexandra. Show her everything she needs to know. I pulled out my copy of the transition agreement you'd given me yesterday. Actually, I've been reviewing this. The terms are quite interesting. You're offering 6 months' salary for 11 years of service, with a non-compete clause that would prevent me from working anywhere in the industry for 2 years. I met his eyes. That seems rather unbalanced. James' expression hardened. That's standard for executives at your level. Is it? And does the board know about this transition? About replacing the manager of our largest account 3 weeks before their contract renewal. The board trusts my judgment on personnel matters. Fascinating. I stood up. Well, if there's nothing else, I should get back to training Alexandra. Though I have to warn you, my traditional methods might take longer than a week to transfer. Just fix this, James snapped. I don't care how. As I walked back to my desk, I saw Alexandra huddled with James's assistant, looking distressed. She quickly straightened up when she saw me. Margaret, that call didn't go quite as planned. So I heard. Would you like to review the technical specifications now? She glanced at her watch. I actually have a lunch meeting with James and some of the team leads. Maybe this afternoon. Of course, I smiled. Though you should know, the Harrison Miller project team usually sends their weekly status report around 2 p.m. They'll probably have questions about the new development phase we discussed last week. Alexandra's face fell. Development phase. Don't worry, I assured her. I'm sure James can help you handle it. He did say you were perfectly qualified for this role. The rest of the day passed similarly. Alexandra bounced between meetings with James and the team leads, clearly trying to absorb as much information as possible. But 11 years of complex client relationships, technical knowledge, and carefully nurtured trust couldn't be transferred in a few rushed sessions. At 4:30 p.m., my phone lit up with a text from Marcus Harrison. Dinner with Robert was enlightening. Board meeting moved up to Friday. Expect formal communication tomorrow. I allowed myself a small smile. The pieces were falling into place. As I packed up for the day, Alexandra stopped by my desk one last time. Her earlier confidence had been replaced by barely concealed panic. Margaret, she started, her voice lower than usual. Maybe we could grab dinner, go over everything in more detail. I feel like there's so much I still need to know. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I'm sorry, Alexandra. As James explained, I'm moving to reduced hours. I'm not available for after-hours meetings anymore. I paused. But I'm sure you'll figure it out. After all, it's important to be adaptable. The look on her face as I left was worth every moment of yesterday's humiliation. But this was just the beginning. Tomorrow, James would learn that some things in business can't be rushed, some relationships can't be transferred, and some people are not, in fact, dispensable. Wednesday morning arrived with a storm, both literally and figuratively. Rain lashed against the office windows as I sorted through my emails, each one bringing news that made my smile grow wider. The first came from Harrison Miller's board secretary. Emergency board meeting scheduled for Friday, 10 a.m. Attendance mandatory for all senior account representatives. The second was from our own board secretary. Urgent meeting requests from Harrison Miller leadership. All relevant parties to attend Friday, 10 a.m. The third was from James, my office, 8:30 a.m. Urgent. I took my time finishing my morning tea before heading to James' office. When I arrived, he wasn't alone. Alexandra sat in one chair, looking like she hadn't slept. A man I recognized as Michael Porter, our legal counsel, occupied the other. Close the door, James snapped. I did so, then took the remaining seat, folding my hands in my lap. Good morning, everyone. Did you know about this? James thrust a paper across his desk. It was a formal letter from Harrison Miller, outlining their concerns about the management transition. About what specifically? I asked, skimming a letter I helped Marcus draft 2 days ago. This. James jabbed his finger at a paragraph. The contract clause requiring 90 days notice and board approval for any change in senior account management. I put on my best surprise expression. Oh, that clause. Yes, of course. It's been part of our agreement since the last renewal. And you didn't think to mention this? I assumed you reviewed the contract thoroughly before deciding to replace me, I said mildly. Given that Harrison Miller is our largest client. Michael Porter cleared his throat. The clause is quite clear. We're in breach if we proceed with an immediate transition. Can't we just delay the transition? Alexandra spoke up. Give them the 90 days notice now. The renewal is in 3 weeks, James growled. They could walk away entirely. That would be unfortunate, I'd observed, especially since their business represents almost a third of our annual revenue. James's face had taken on an interesting shade of purple. Margaret, you need to fix this. Call Marcus. Tell him you're fully supportive of the transition. I raised an eyebrow. But that would be dishonest, wouldn't it? And our ethics policy strictly prohibits misleading clients. I turned to Michael. Isn't that right? The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. She's correct. Given the sensitivity of the situation, any miscommunication could worsen our position. Position? James's voice rose. What position? This is an internal staffing decision, which directly impacts a $50 million contract, I pointed out. A contract that, I should mention, includes several other interesting clauses about service continuity and account management expertise. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Michael spoke. James, I need to review the entire contract if there are other relevant clauses. The contract is available in a secure system, I offered helpfully. Though some of the technical addenda are quite complex, I'd be happy to walk you through them. Do it, James ordered. And Margaret, you're not going anywhere until this is resolved. I stood smoothing my skirt. Of course not. I take my responsibilities very seriously, even the traditional ones. As I led Michael toward the contract review room, I heard Alexandra's panicked voice. James, I didn't know it would be this complicated. The rest of the morning dissolved into chaos. Michael spent hours reviewing the contract, his frown deepening with each page. Alexandra tried desperately to prepare for Friday's board meeting, but every attempt to understand the technical aspects of our service agreement left her more confused. Around noon, my phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. Just reviewed the transition documents they sent over. Very enlightening. Friday will be interesting. I allowed myself a small smile. Marcus had always appreciated the detailed notes I kept about every promise, every commitment, every special arrangement we'd made. Notes that were now proving very valuable. At 2 p.m., James called another emergency meeting. This time, our CEO David Chen was present via video conference, his usually calm demeanor replaced by obvious concern. Some might explain to me, he began, how we managed to overlook contractual obligations with our largest client. James started to speak, but David cut him off. And why am I just learning about this transition now, 2 days after it was announced? David. James tried again. I was streamlining the department. Margaret's methods are outdated, and Alexandra brings fresh. Stop. David's voice was sharp. Margaret, is there any way to salvage this? All eyes turned to me. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The contract is quite clear, I said carefully. Any transition requires 90 days notice and board approval from both companies. Additionally, the renewal terms we've been negotiating include specific requirements about technical expertise and service continuity. Requirements that Alexandra can meet, James insisted. I turned to Alexandra. Could you explain to everyone how our API integration with Harrison Miller's legacy systems works? The one we custom-built for their European expansion. Alexandra's face went pale. That wasn't covered in the handover yet. No, I agreed. We haven't had time to cover many things, like the specialized reporting system we developed for their compliance requirements, or the emergency protocols we established after last year's security audit. David's sigh crackled through the speakers. James, my office, 5 p.m. Margaret, please prepare a complete summary of our obligations under the Harrison Miller contract. And he hesitated. Perhaps you should attend Friday's board meeting to help smooth things over. I nodded graciously. Of course, I'm happy to help in any way I can. As we filed out of the conference room, James grabbed my arm. You planned this, he hissed. You deliberately set us up. I gently removed his hand. No, James. You did that all on your own when you decided I was dispensable. I straightened my jacket. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a board meeting to prepare for. Walking back to my desk, I felt lighter than I had in days. Friday was approaching, and with it, the moment when everyone would understand exactly why experience matters. James thought he could discard me like outdated technology, but he was about to learn that some things can't be upgraded with a newer model, especially not when the original version holds all the passwords to the system. Friday morning arrived crisp and clear. I dressed with particular care, choosing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit I'd been saving for special occasions. As I pinned my silver hair into its usual elegant twist, I smiled at my reflection. Today would be memorable. The Harrison Miller board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. at their downtown headquarters. I arrived at 9:30, nodding to the security guard who'd known me for years. In the lobby, I found James and Alexandra already waiting, both looking tense. Margaret, James acknowledged stiffly. He'd avoided me since his meeting with the CEO 2 days ago. Alexandra couldn't meet my eyes. She'd spent yesterday desperately trying to understand the technical aspects of our service agreement, making increasingly panicked calls to our development team for explanations. At 9:45, we were escorted to Harrison Miller's executive floor. The boardroom was impressive, all mahogany and leather, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Marcus Harrison sat at the head of the table, flanked by his board members. Robert Stevens, their COO, sat nearby, shooting daggers at Alexandra with his eyes. Our CEO, David Chen, had flown in for the meeting. He greeted Marcus warmly, though the tension was visible in his shoulders. Our own board members filled the remaining seats, including Michael Porter, who was still clutching the contract documents he'd been reviewing obsessively. "Shall we begin?" Marcus's voice cut through the murmurs. "We're here to discuss some concerning developments regarding our partnership with Elevate Technologies." James straightened in his chair. "Mr. Harrison, if I may." "No, you may not," Marcus cut him off. "First, I'd like Margaret to explain exactly what's been happening." I stood slowly, gathering my notes. "Thank you, Marcus. As you all know, I've managed the Harrison Miller account for 11 years. On Monday, I was informed that I would be immediately replaced by Alexandra Porter, with a 1-week transition period. Without consulting us, Robert interjected. "Yes," I continued. "The decision was made without regard to the contractual requirement of 90 days notice and board approval from both companies." "And what about the technical expertise requirements?" Marcus asked. I glanced at Alexandra, who seemed to shrink in her chair. Perhaps Alexandra could explain her understanding of our custom API integration. The silence was deafening. Marcus turned to David. "Your company has provided excellent service for years, largely due to Margaret's expertise. She understands our systems, our needs, our goals. Now, 3 weeks before our contract renewal, we learn you're replacing her with someone who doesn't even understand the basics of our integration." David shot a dark look at James. "This transition was not handled appropriately. We acknowledge that." "Not handled appropriately?" Robert laughed harshly. "It's a breach of contract. Section 15.3 clearly states." "If I may," I interrupted smoothly, "there might be a way forward that benefits everyone." All eyes turned to me. The contract renewal includes expanded services for Harrison Miller's European operations. It would require someone with intimate knowledge of both the technical infrastructure and the compliance requirements. Someone who has successfully managed similar expansions. Marcus leaned forward. "Someone like you?" "Perhaps," I smiled slightly, though not as an Elevate employee. The room went still. James's face drained of color as he realized what was coming. "I've been offered a position with Global Solutions Partners as their Director of Strategic Accounts," I revealed. "They're very interested in expanding their European presence." David sat up sharply. "Global Solutions was our biggest competitor." "Of course," I continued, "I'm bound by certain non-compete clauses in my severance agreement. The one James asked me to sign." I paused. "Oh wait, I never signed it, did I?" James looked like he might faint. Marcus was trying to hide a smile. "Are you suggesting you might take our business to Global Solutions?" "I would never suggest such a thing," I replied diplomatically. "I'm merely pointing out that my expertise and relationships will be available elsewhere. Unless," David prompted. "Unless we discuss a different arrangement," I turned to face our board members. One that values experience over adaptability. The next hour was intense. Our board members huddled in one corner, speaking in urgent whispers. David pulled James aside, their heated discussion visible through the glass walls. Alexandra slipped out quietly. Nobody noticed her departure. Finally, David returned to the table. "Margaret, what exactly are you proposing?" I laid out my terms clearly. "I'll establish a new division, Strategic Client Services. I'll report directly to the board, not to James. I'll handle the Harrison Miller renewal and expansion, with full autonomy to build my team. And of course, appropriate compensation adjustments. And a board seat," Marcus added unexpectedly. "We'd feel more comfortable with Margaret having a voice in company decisions." David looked at his board members, who nodded slowly. The math was simple. Lose a $50 million contract and potentially more to a competitor, or give me what I deserved all along. "Agreed," David said finally. "We'll have the paperwork drawn up immediately." James stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You can't let her blackmail the company like this." "James," David's voice was ice. "You're suspended pending a review of your management decisions. Please clear your office by the end of the day." As the meeting wrapped up, Marcus caught my eye and winked. He played his part perfectly, though the threat of taking their business elsewhere had been genuine. Back at the office, news spread quickly. I walked to my desk, head high, as whispers followed me. James was nowhere to be seen. though I heard the sound of boxes being packed in his office. A week later, I sat in my new corner office, reviewing resumes for my team. The Harrison Miller contract renewal had been signed, including expanded services that would double its value over the next 3 years. Global Solutions had sent me a gift basket with a note saying their offer still stood. I kept it displayed prominently on my credenza. Alexandra had transferred to a junior position in marketing. Sometimes I saw her in the break room, where she carefully avoided eye contact. James had been asked to resign after a review revealed other questionable decisions. Last I heard, he was working for a small startup, reporting to a director younger than Alexandra. As for me, I ran my fingers over the new nameplate on my door. Margaret Wilson, Executive Director of Strategic Client Services, Board Member. Not bad for someone supposedly too traditional to adapt. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. It was David. Margaret, got a minute? The board wants your input on our new diversity and inclusion initiative, particularly regarding age discrimination in management decisions. I smiled, picking up my tablet. Of course, I might have some thoughts on that. As I followed him to the boardroom, I reflected on the past 2 weeks. James had thought he could push me aside, replace me with a younger model, discard my experience like an outdated phone. Instead, he'd learned an expensive lesson. True value doesn't have an expiration date. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply step back and let people face the consequences of underestimating you. And me? I was just getting started. After all, experience only gets better with age.